Hello and welcome from the lovely city of Munich and my living room, because most of you, it's home office this year. I'm here today with my colleague Darpan. Both,
Hello.
both of us are working at Scale Up a Capital. And today we want to present you a little tool that we have written and that we are heavily using within Scale Up a Capital. Before I dive into that, feel free to shoot any questions that you want at us, because we are actually not presenting. Everything here is pre-recorded. So we are able to answer all of your questions that might arise during the talk. That said, let's jump to our tool. The tool that we're going to present is called the Next App Builder. And it is nothing more than a builder that allows you to set up your custom app by passing it a list of middlewares. And you might be wondering why that is useful. And that's why Darpan is going to explain to you what we need it for, or actually where it came from.
At Scalable, we use GraphQL, and to handle GraphQL in the front end, we use Apollo. And we also use server-side rendering with it because we don't want users to have a laggy experience. We also use Material UI as our component library, and we also do server-side rendering there. And last but not least, we have Sentry, which is our error monitoring tool. And this is the basic setup that we need for any app at Scalable Capital. Anna, could you show me how a custom app would look like with Next.js with these three tools?
Of course, I'd love to. What we're doing here is we are extending the Next App class. We're doing that because whenever an error occurs, we actually want to forward the error to Sentry. Sentry is a lovely error management tool. Check it out if you're interested in it. But that's all we do with Sentry. So basically, we just forward the error to make sure whenever something occurs, one of our developers is notified. The second thing that we are doing is we're using Material UI. Material UI needs a theme that is passed to all of the component. That's what you see in the render function. And it needs a component that mount, because we actually generate all of the CSS on the server. But whenever you do that, you would interfere with the CSS that the client provides. So whenever the first rendering happened, we would clean that up. And that's what's happening in component did mount. The third thing that we do is Apollo. Apollo again needs a provider to allow all of the components to do independent queries. And like with Material UI, we actually want to fetch the data all on the server so that when the client enters our page or sees our page, all of his data is already there and loaded. And in order to do that, we need something called the GraphQL initial state. And we get that from the page props, and we get the page props from get initial props. Whenever you need page props, you do get initial props. In a nutshell, what's happening here? A fucking lot. But to be more precise, the important thing is get data from tree. That would render the app tree, collect all the queries, and then execute them. That's why you do an await here. And we then extract all of the data from the client and pass it as page props. Well, we were really, really proud of ourselves to do that once.
Once, we did that multiple times. So let me show you a life of a front-end developer at Scalable. We have multiple apps, Broker Cockpit, Wealth Cockpit, onboarding for that. Apart from that, we have B2B partnerships with a couple of banks, and we have the same setup there, that we have an onboarding, we have a cockpit, and now you can see where we are going with this. We need the same setup for every app, and maintaining all of that at the same newer versions is not easy. It's a bit tedious. And that's why we came up with the concept of the Next App Builder. Anna, can you show me how would we use the Next App Builder?
Well, that's how our Next App Builder looks whenever we need to set up a basic application. Next App Builder is a builder function that accepts a list of middlewares. Each middleware has one single responsibility. If you remember the code in the render function of our custom app, there were like 3 different purposes in there. There was the actual page, there was an Apollo provider, and a Material UI provider. Here, all of them are split up. Bonus here is the 2 of them, Material UI and Apollo, are builder methods. Because all of the themes are different throughout the applications, we actually wanted to be able to pass that from the outside. Now, what does a middleware do? A middleware basically allows you to pass functionality for everything that you can do in a custom app, custom Next app. Get initial props to load data on the server, component, which equals the render function within the app class, component did catch, and last but not least, we have a name. The name is optional, and what it does is that whenever something doesn't work with your middleware, we would log the name. So it's easier to debug and easier to find out what might be going wrong. Well, Darpan, what is going on in Sentry?
As you see here, so what we are doing is that if we have a component did catch, we get the error there and we send it to Sentry. That's it. It doesn't know about anything else.
How do we do Material UI?
So like you mentioned earlier, Anna, this is a builder function. So it accepts a theme and then passes it forward. And do you see that there's a Material UI app middleware component? And over there, we are rendering the theme provider, which gets a theme. And we have a user fig there, which is doing the job which was being done in component did mount. That is removing the server-side GSS and letting the client take care of it.
Well, that means basically, even if I need component did catch, I can still use functional components, can't I?
Yeah, that's the beauty of functional components. You can do everything at one single place, right?
That is true. And because the Sentry is a totally different middleware, it's not interfering. I'm not forced to actually use a class component here.
Yeah, and they don't know about each other.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Last but not least, the Apollo, as is our middleware. There is not much more magic going on than in the others. So we would actually override the get initial props, and we would provide a component. However, there's one detail that I want to point out here, and that's the middleware is typed. So if you're the fortunate one to use TypeScript, you can actually say what data is returned from my get initial props. And that will then be used for your component. So you can be sure that every data that is in that type is actually there and usable.
So this is the real life. On the left-hand side, you can see that what we started with, the one huge app, custom app, which had everything together thrown in. And on the right-hand side, using the next step builder, where everything has its own component. That's beautiful.
And what's really, really nice, and what we didn't even start to talk about, is that's the basic setup. So all of our applications start off like that and then have a ton of other stuff, like a layout, like authentication. And before we had a builder, we would just copy and paste it. And then we had to extract and figure out what shouldn't be in there, what should not be in there. Well, with the build, all we do is kind of like, we just choose the middlewares that we need and plug them in and out as we go. We have partners which are not allowed to use Sentry for compliance reasons. So all we do is just drop it. And that's why we are so madly in love with it. Same goes actually for any kind of update. Whenever we want to use a new major version of Apollo, all we have to do is update the middleware. We do not have to touch any other place. It's just the middleware. Okay.
Yeah, and we can also encapsulate the breaking changes if we can, so that the client does not, anyone who is using that, they don't have a breaking change.
That is so true. If you believe that that tool can help your life and save you a lot of hours and a lot of lines of code, you can find it on GitHub with Skarka Next App Builder. Oh, just install it using Yarn.
Or NPM.
Or NPM. We are not discriminating against NPM. We love NPM as well. If there's still any questions, those are our handles again. If that talk wasn't for you, there is one message that we want you to take away from it.
Clean up your code.
Whatever you do, build tiny builders, build tools to have less lines of code, to have less copy and paste, to be able to reuse your code, to encapsulate your code. Please. Well, that's it from Munich.
Bye.
Bye.